It was a bright Saturday morning, and the aroma of fresh coffee lingered in the living room. I had just finished tidying up when I noticed her, my daughter-in-law, standing near the window, staring out into the garden. Something about her demeanor was different. A quiet glow that seemed to emanate from somewhere beyond her usual cheerfulness. Curiosity, a mother's instinctive trait, nudged me. I walked over casually, trying to mask the unease curling in my chest. "Sweetheart," I asked lightly, "why aren't you wearing your ring today?" She didn't turn around immediately. Her fingers traced patterns on the lace curtains, as though she were weaving a secret into their folds. I waited, trying to catch any clue in her expression, but her face remained composed, serene, almost untouchable. Finally, she turned. Her eyes were softer, but there was a weight in them that I hadn't noticed before. Leaning slightly closer, she whispered, almost as if she feared the walls would hear her secret. "I took his last name last night." I froze mid-step, my hand gripping the edge of the windowsill. My heart skipped a beat. Confusion, shock, and a twinge of something I couldn't immediately name collided inside me. My mind raced through the possibilities, trying to reconstruct the scene she had just painted in those few words. Last night, the house had been quiet. My son had been home, of course, but I had thought it was just another ordinary evening. How could they have done this, and why hadn't I known? The whispers of secrecy in her tone hinted at a deliberate choice, a private world that had been spun away from mine without permission. I wanted to demand answers immediately, to understand the why and how, but a strange calm settled over me. I studied her face, trying to detect any hint of remorse, pride, or fear, and yet her expression was unreadable. She wasn't defiant, nor was she guilty. It was almost as if she had simply stepped into a new identity, quietly, irreversibly. "Last night?" I repeated, my voice a mix of disbelief and intrigue. "You mean, the wedding?" Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Yes," she whispered again, leaning in so close that her words felt like a secret meant solely for me. "We didn't want a big ceremony. We wanted it to be ours, private." I sank into the nearest chair, my thoughts spinning. My son, my dear boy, had orchestrated this, and I had been left in the dark. The emotions that washed over me were turbulent. Pride for their independence, yes, but also a sharp sting of exclusion. A wedding, a union meant to celebrate love and family, had occurred without me knowing. And yet, as I looked at her, I saw a calm that was almost enviable. She had claimed her place in this new world, taken the first bold step toward building a life with him. My mind wavered between admiration and frustration, caught in the whirlwind of shock and awe. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She sighed, a soft, almost musical sound, and sat down across from me. "I wanted it to be real first," she said, "before we shared it with anyone. I needed to feel it, us, without the world watching." The simplicity of her words, the quiet courage, left me momentarily speechless. I wanted to be angry, to lash out at the secrecy, but I also recognized the honesty in her confession. She hadn't hidden it to hurt me. She had chosen privacy, intimacy, and authenticity over the spectacle that everyone expected. As I absorbed the reality, I realized that life was shifting in subtle but undeniable ways. The wedding, though unseen, had changed our family dynamics overnight. I was no longer the only matriarch overseeing every detail. They had carved out a space for themselves. And in that quiet revelation, I felt the first pangs of acceptance stir. We sat in silence for a few moments, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, she reached out, her hand brushing mine. "I wanted you to know, Mom," she said softly, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "We're happy, and that's what matters. Happiness." The word echoed through me, softening the edges of my initial shock. Perhaps it wasn't about control or ceremony, but about love and choice. And slowly, reluctantly, I began to nod, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yes," I whispered back, almost to myself. "That's what matters." Yet deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The revelation of last night had opened a door. one that would lead to further surprises, conflicts, and perhaps even revelations I wasn't ready to face. But for now, the first whisper had been spoken, and the ripples were already spreading. The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains, but the warmth it brought did nothing to calm the storm in my mind. Her words from last night echoed repeatedly. I took his last name last night. It was a simple whisper, yet it had shattered my expectations of what family, tradition, and inclusion meant. I tried to maintain my composure as I went about my day, but every step reminded me of the secret they had shared with each other, excluding me. Coffee in hand, I moved toward the kitchen, only to find her already there, arranging breakfast with the precision of someone who had meticulously planned their life in parallel to mine. I took a deep breath. This wasn't the time for anger, yet it simmered beneath the surface. I needed to understand the entire sequence of events. Tell me everything, I said carefully, trying to balance curiosity with the restraint I'd been clinging to. She glanced up, her eyes meeting mine with a combination of honesty and apprehension. It wasn't sudden, she began softly, almost as if fearing my reaction might shatter the fragile atmosphere between us. We've been planning this quietly for months. We wanted something meaningful, something that was ours before anyone else could define it. I nodded slowly, urging her to continue. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm she tried to project. It started with conversations, she said. Private talks at night, long walks where we shared our fears and dreams. And then one night, we decided we couldn't wait any longer. We wanted the commitment, the official step, and we wanted it to be real, not performative. Her explanation was logical, even admirable, yet I couldn't ignore the sting of being left out. And my son? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He knew? He agreed to keep it a secret? She nodded. Yes, he wanted to surprise you in a way. But I think maybe we underestimated how you'd feel about not knowing. We weren't trying to hurt you. We just... She hesitated, searching for words. Wanted the moment to belong solely to us. The honesty in her voice made my chest tighten. I realized that my initial feelings of betrayal were entwined with my desire to control, to be present in every milestone of their lives. And yet, this was their life, a life they had begun to shape independently. I wanted to ask more. Details of the ceremony. Who attended, what vows they had exchanged. But somehow, I didn't. There was an intimacy in their secret that perhaps should remain untouched. I forced myself to swallow the frustration that threatened to rise. Suddenly, the ringing of my phone broke the silence. It was my son, calling from work. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Mom? His voice sounded lighter than usual, almost buoyant. Have you talked to her yet? Yes, I said slowly, keeping my emotions in check. She told me. There was a pause on the other end. And I'm processing it, I admitted, though even I wasn't sure what processing truly meant in this context. I guess I just need to understand the reasoning behind keeping it so private. His laugh, soft and genuine, traveled through the phone line. Mom, I promise we didn't do it to exclude you. We just wanted a moment that was ours. You'll understand once you see the joy on our faces. His words made me pause. I knew him. He had always been a kind, considerate man. Perhaps in their attempt to create a private world for themselves, they had only tried to protect the sanctity of that moment from the noise of expectations. I looked at her, and she gave me a small, hopeful smile. We wanted this to be perfect for us, she said again. And now it is. We want you to celebrate with us, yes, but also understand that some moments are ours alone. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Pride, frustration, awe, and a hint of resentment. I wanted to be angry, but how could I when their happiness was so palpable? I realized that my role was changing. I wasn't an observer in their lives anymore. I was becoming a participant in a narrative that had already started without me. All right, I said finally, letting a small smile escape. Then I'll celebrate with you. But you owe me the details. Everything, from vows to who cried first. She laughed softly, relief flashing across her features. Deal, she whispered. As the morning unfolded, I watched them together, hand in hand, a new world of possibilities opening before them. Their secret marriage was more than just a legal ceremony. It was a statement of autonomy, love, and trust. And though I felt the pang of being left out, I also recognized that the bond they shared was something sacred, something that deserved its own space. Yet deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of challenges. Secrets have a way of rippling through families, stirring emotions that lie dormant until tested. And while today was filled with tentative understanding, tomorrow might bring revelations I wasn't prepared to face. The whisper of last night had set a chain reaction in motion, one that would redefine relationships, loyalties, and expectations. And as I sipped my coffee, I braced myself for the unfolding journey, one filled with love, conflict, and the unspoken truths that families often hide. The afternoon sun poured through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the living room. Even the familiar walls of my home felt different now, somehow smaller, as if the secrets shared last night had subtly reshaped the space. I still couldn't shake the memory of her whisper. I took his last name last night. The words had settled like a stone in my chest, heavy, undeniable, and yet oddly mesmerizing. I wandered toward the hallway where family photos lined the walls. Each frame reminded me of milestones, celebrations, and gatherings, all events where I had felt essential, included, and in control. And yet, this private wedding had bypassed me entirely. My heart twisted at the thought. They had chosen autonomy over tradition, secrecy over ceremony, and somehow, I had been rendered irrelevant, at least for one night. Her presence behind me startled me slightly. "Mom," she said gently, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Would you like to see the pictures?" I turned toward her, my brow furrowed. "Pictures?" I asked, curiosity mingled with a hint of suspicion. "Yes," she said, holding a small envelope carefully in her hands. "From last night. I wanted you to see them, but only if you were ready." I hesitated for a moment. Seeing them might make the secret feel more tangible, more real. But a part of me also craved the connection, the understanding of what had truly transpired. Finally, I nodded, and she handed me the envelope with a quiet reverence. Inside were photographs of a simple, intimate ceremony. Candlelight danced across their faces, highlighting the joy and love that radiated between them. My son's eyes sparkled with a happiness I had rarely witnessed, and she, my daughter-in-law, looked ethereal, her smile soft yet radiant. It was a wedding without fanfare, without the typical pomp that often accompanied such events, and yet, its beauty was undeniable. I flipped through the images slowly, absorbing each moment. There was the quiet exchange of rings, the subtle nods and glances that conveyed more than words ever could, and the gentle intertwining of hands that spoke volumes about their bond. Every photograph was a testament to their choice, their autonomy, and their love. And yet, as I studied the images, I couldn't suppress the sting of exclusion. They had celebrated a pivotal moment without me, and though the intention had been purity and privacy, my mind wrestled with feelings of being left out. "Do you like them?" she asked softly, sensing the swirl of emotions within me. "They're beautiful," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But why the secrecy? Why not include me?" Her eyes softened. "Mom, you've always been important to us. But this was different. This wasn't just about tradition. It was about starting a life together without expectations, without judgment. We wanted the memory to be ours first. I hope you understand." I nodded slowly, trying to reconcile my feelings. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about pride. It was about love, about two people carving a path together and inviting me along only when they felt ready. Then, a sudden thought struck me. The guests. Who had attended this private wedding? I looked at her sharply. Did anyone else know? Her lips curved into a playful smile. "Just a few close friends," she said. "People who have known us for years." They were witnesses, but nothing more. No announcements, no fanfare. Just the people who mattered. I exhaled, relief mingling with lingering frustration. It was as I suspected, a true private ceremony, carefully curated to honor their bond without the interference of expectation. As we talked, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The initial tension began to melt, replaced by a tentative warmth. I realized that this was a turning point, not just for them, but for me as well. Their secret had been a challenge to my sense of inclusion, but it was also a lesson in trust and acceptance. I looked at my son when he returned from work later that afternoon. His presence alone seemed to fill the room with calm energy, a reminder that love often transcends our expectations. He smiled knowingly, sensing that I had seen the pictures, understood the intent, and was gradually letting go of my initial shock. "We wanted you to share this with us eventually," he said, his tone gentle yet firm. "Not to exclude you, but to honor the moment for ourselves first." His words resonated deeply. I realized that love, in its purest form, sometimes requires boundaries, privacy, and trust. They had chosen to honor their bond in a way that felt authentic, and it was my responsibility to respect that choice. Yet even as I accepted this, I knew the story wasn't over. Secrets, no matter how pure, often carry consequences. There would be questions, moments of awkwardness, and perhaps even subtle resentment that needed to be navigated. But for now, the photographs were proof of a night that had changed everything, a night that was theirs alone, and yet through these images had begun to include me in their new world. I placed the envelope carefully on the table, savoring the quiet intimacy of the moment. Their wedding was over, yet its impact lingered, rippling through the family dynamics in ways that were subtle but profound. And as I sat back, I realized that while I hadn't been part of the ceremony itself, I was now part of something equally significant. The acknowledgement of their love, the beginning of a new chapter, and the promise of inclusion on their terms. The whisper of last night, "I took his last name last night," had initiated a transformation. And as I watched them together, hand in hand, a new respect blossomed within me. Love, I understood now, was as much about giving space as it was about sharing presence. And yet, deep down, I sensed there were more revelations ahead, threads of the story that remained hidden, waiting for the right moment to surface. The secret wedding was only the beginning, and the ripples it caused were far from over. The news of their secret marriage, though still confined to our household, had begun to stir subtle ripples in the family. While my son and daughter-in-law had chosen to keep the event intimate, the very nature of their decision was bound to ignite curiosity, speculation, and perhaps even resentment among relatives who were used to being in the loop. I could feel it before anyone spoke. The tension in the air, the slight hesitation in voices, the glances that lingered just a bit too long. When my brother called that afternoon, his tone was cheerful on the surface, but I detected the curiosity that lay beneath. "So, I heard some news," he said cautiously, as though testing the waters. "Yes," I replied slowly, bracing myself. "They married, privately." A pause followed, heavy and deliberate. "Privately? Without telling anyone?" he asked, a faint edge of disbelief creeping into his words. "Yes," I confirmed. "It was their choice. They wanted the moment to belong to themselves first." He exhaled audibly, the sound carrying more than surprise, perhaps a tinge of irritation. "Well, that's certainly unconventional." It was the understatement of the century. Unconventional barely captured the shockwaves of exclusion that reverberated silently through the family. I could feel a mixture of admiration, frustration, and bewilderment all at once. On one hand, their courage and independence were impressive. On the other, the secrecy challenged long-standing family dynamics and expectations. Later that evening, when we sat down for dinner, the weight of unspoken questions hung over the table like a fog. My son and daughter-in-law were calm, almost serenely so, but the rest of us were conscious of every pause, every glance, every subtle shift in body language. Finally, my niece, ever curious and blunt, broke the silence. "So, you two got married and didn't tell anyone? Not even Mom?" she asked, her tone a mixture of disbelief and playful accusation. I felt my daughter-in-law's hand brush against mine under the table, a subtle reminder that she had shared the truth with me, the first step toward inclusion. My son nodded, his eyes gleaming with quiet pride. "Yes," he said simply. "We wanted it to be our moment first. But now we want to celebrate with family. That's why we're telling you." The simplicity of his explanation should have sufficed, but I sensed the unspoken tension, the undercurrent of expectations that had been disrupted. Some family members seemed to struggle with the idea that this monumental life event had occurred without their knowledge. And yet, as I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, I understood their perspective. The decision to marry in secret was not about exclusion, but about intimacy and autonomy. Even as we discussed the event, I noticed subtle shifts in dynamics. Cousins whispered quietly, exchanging glances that hinted at curiosity and perhaps mild envy. My brother's wife, usually the first to comment on family news, seemed unusually quiet, her eyes flicking toward the couple with an expression that was hard to read. I realized that their secret had triggered a ripple effect, one that extended beyond our household and into the extended family. The ripple was not just about the wedding. It was about expectations, control, and the balance of power within familial relationships. Later that night, when the house had quieted and everyone had retreated to their rooms, I found myself alone with my daughter-in-law in the living room. She looked at me with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I nodded slowly, reflecting on the day's events. "I am," I said honestly, "but I can feel the tension. People are going to talk. There will be questions. There will be opinions." She leaned back, her gaze thoughtful. "We expected that. We knew it wouldn't be easy for everyone to accept, but we're ready. We want to face it together, as a couple and with family." Her words struck me deeply. There was a strength in her resolve, a quiet confidence that I admired. This wasn't just about a secret wedding. It was about forging a partnership that could withstand external pressures, judgments, and the inevitable ripple effects of their choices. As the night deepened, I reflected on the events of the past days. The secret wedding had been a catalyst, a revelation that shifted relationships, tested patience, and demanded understanding. It had challenged my assumptions about family, control, and inclusion, and it had forced me to confront my own expectations and emotions. And yet, beneath the tension and uncertainty, there was a thread of hope, a recognition that love, when authentic and intentional, could navigate even the most turbulent waters. The whisper of last night, I took his last name last night, had initiated not just a personal change, but a transformation in how we all related to one another. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring new challenges. Conversations with relatives, reactions from friends, and perhaps even unanticipated confrontations awaited us. But for tonight, I allowed myself to sit in the quiet, to absorb the moment, and to recognize the courage it took for two people to claim their love on their own terms. The secret wedding had concluded, but its ripples were far from over, and as I watched my son and daughter-in-law together, hand in hand, I knew that the journey ahead would test, challenge, and ultimately define the resilience of our family in ways we could not yet fully comprehend. The next morning brought a tense hush over the household. Even the usual clatter of breakfast seemed muted, as if everyone was holding their breath in anticipation of the inevitable questions and murmurs that would follow the revelation of the secret wedding. I sat at the table, trying to sip my coffee while keeping my composure, but the subtle glances exchanged between my relatives made it clear that whispers had already begun. I could feel the ripple spreading, invisible yet undeniable, in every eye that flicked toward us. Finally, my brother cleared his throat. "So, about last night," he began, his tone cautious. "I hear you two got married without telling anyone." My son, calm as always, looked up, meeting his brother-in-law's gaze with steady eyes. "Yes," he said simply. "We wanted a private moment, just for ourselves. We didn't mean to upset anyone." "Upset?" The word barely captured the swirl of emotions in the room. My niece, sitting beside my brother, whispered under her breath, "Talk about drama," but her eyes betrayed fascination more than judgment. I could feel the tension coil tighter, ready to snap. "Drama?" I interjected, my voice firmer than intended. "This isn't drama. It's their choice, a personal decision. They chose intimacy over spectacle. Isn't that worth respecting?" A silence fell. Even my brother seemed taken aback by my defense. His expression shifted, revealing a mixture of confusion, surprise, and perhaps begrudging understanding. I suppose, he muttered, not quite convinced. The day progressed, but the whispers didn't cease. Relatives called, curious friends stopped by, and even distant family members sent messages asking if the news was true. Each time I had to explain, carefully balancing honesty and diplomacy. Their private moment had inadvertently become a topic of speculation and gossip, and it was clear that some people were struggling to accept that we had not been included in the original celebration. In the evening, my son and daughter-in-law sat down with me in the living room, a quiet determination in their eyes. "We know this is harder for everyone than we expected," my daughter-in-law began. "But we didn't mean to hurt anyone. This was never about exclusion. It was about creating something meaningful for us first." "I understand that," I said softly. "I do, but the reactions, they're going to be challenging. Some people will take offense, and others will question your motives." Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "Let them," she said quietly. "We've made our choice. It's real, and that's what matters. The rest, we'll face together." Her courage resonated with me. I realized that the secret wedding, while shocking, was a testament to their strength as a couple. It was a step toward autonomy, trust, and love, something far more enduring than the fleeting judgments of others. Still, the day was far from over. My brother's wife finally voiced what many were thinking. "I just don't understand why it had to be a secret," she said, her tone sharper now. "It feels disrespectful." I looked at her, my patience flaring gently. It wasn't disrespect. It was private. They wanted to experience a life-changing moment without interference. That doesn't diminish anyone's role in their lives. It simply honors the moment for them first. The conversation grew tense, words carefully measured, but emotions simmering beneath. I could sense that the secret wedding had not only shifted dynamics between my son and daughter-in-law and the extended family, but it had also stirred latent feelings of control, expectation, and pride. Yet amidst the tension, there was also an undeniable admiration. Even those who struggled to accept the secrecy couldn't deny the sincerity in their eyes, the commitment in their gestures, and the authenticity of their decision. The secret wedding was a quiet rebellion against tradition, but it was also a declaration of love and partnership. As night fell, the household settled into an uneasy calm. The whispers had quieted, but the ripple effects remained, lingering in glances, half-finished sentences, and subtle shifts in tone. I understood that while the wedding itself was over, the consequences, emotional, relational, and social, would continue to unfold for days, weeks, and perhaps months. Sitting alone later, reflecting on the events of the day, I realized that my role had changed irrevocably. No longer the sole orchestrator or overseer of family milestones, I was now a participant in a more complex, layered narrative, one that demanded understanding, patience, and trust. And yet, beneath the quiet tension, I felt a flicker of hope. The secret wedding, though controversial and divisive, had demonstrated the resilience of love and the strength of the bond between my son and his wife. The challenges ahead, though daunting, were now to be faced together. As a family learning to navigate new dynamics, unexpected truths, and the unpredictable consequences of secrecy. The whisper of last night, "I took his last name last night," had unleashed a wave far greater than anyone could have anticipated. But it was also a wave that, if approached with care, patience, and understanding, could carry us toward a stronger, more authentic connection, one built not on expectation or ceremony, but on love, trust, and choice. And as I prepared for bed, the echoes of the day lingered in my mind, the whispers, the glances, the secret smiles. The journey had only begun, and I knew that tomorrow would bring new revelations, confrontations, and perhaps even more shocking truths, each one testing the resilience of our family and the depth of the bonds that tied us together. The morning sun barely warmed the room as I entered the kitchen. There was an unusual stillness, the kind that precedes a storm. Breakfast sat untouched on the table, steam rising lazily from cups of coffee, yet no one moved. It felt as though every member of the family was bracing for the inevitable confrontation that seemed to hover in the air like a thundercloud. I glanced toward my son and daughter-in-law. Both were calm, almost eerily so, but I knew better. Beneath the surface, they were acutely aware of the scrutiny their private wedding had unleashed. And now, it seemed, the whispers and subtle criticisms of extended family were reaching a tipping point. Before I could say a word, my brother entered the kitchen, his expression a mix of incredulity and exasperation. "I can't believe you two went ahead with this. Without telling anyone," he said, his voice edged with frustration. "It's not just a wedding, it's a statement. And a secret one at that." My daughter-in-law looked up from her coffee, meeting his gaze evenly. "It wasn't meant to be a statement," she said softly. "It was meant to be a choice, ours. We wanted something authentic, private and real. Nothing more." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "Private? Real? You call keeping everyone in the dark real? You've shocked everyone. People are talking, Mom included, and not in whispers. You've changed the family dynamic overnight." I could feel the tension rising, the kind that makes words hang heavy in the air. I had to intervene. "It was their choice," I said firmly, placing a hand on my brother's arm. "They did not do this to hurt anyone. They did it because it mattered to them, and we need to respect that." "But don't you see?" he argued. "We have traditions, expectations, and roles in this family. A wedding isn't just about the couple. It's about all of us who care for them." And now, his voice trailed off, the weight of unspoken grievances filling the silence. My son leaned forward, his tone measured yet firm. "We understand your feelings, but this wasn't about exclusion. This was about our love, our moment, and the beginning of our life together. And it's real. That's what matters." The room fell into a tense silence. Everyone processed the weight of his words differently. Some nodded slowly, reluctantly, acknowledging the validity of his point. Others, however, had a glimmer of resentment, a silent struggle to reconcile their expectations with this bold act of independence. My niece, ever the instigator, finally spoke. "So, you two just decide to take control of your lives, throw a wedding in secret, and expect us all to just accept it?" Her tone was teasing, but the underlying challenge was clear. "Yes," my daughter-in-law replied calmly, not flinching. "We expect respect and understanding. Not everyone will agree, but our decision stands. And it's ours." Her calm resolve had an unexpected effect. The teasing tension began to soften, replaced by quiet contemplation. It was impossible to argue with sincerity, and though the shock lingered, there was an undeniable truth in her words. Later that afternoon, the ripple effect extended beyond the immediate family. Friends who had caught wind of the secret wedding began calling, some in disbelief, others with excitement. Social media messages trickled in, some congratulatory, some curious, and a few pointedly critical. The secret, though initially intimate, had now become a catalyst for public discussion, testing not just the couple's resolve, but the patience and diplomacy of the entire family. As evening approached, I found myself sitting alone with my son, reflecting on the events of the day. "Do you realize what you've unleashed?" I asked, a hint of exasperation in my voice. He smiled faintly. "Yes, I do, and I accept that. Some people will be upset, others will be confused. But this is our life, our choice. We had to do it." I studied him, the weight of maturity and love in his eyes. He was no longer the boy I had guided and protected. He was a man, capable of making bold decisions, facing the consequences, and standing by them with unwavering commitment. The evening settled into a tense quiet. The storm of opinions and emotions would continue, but for now, the core of the conflict remained intact. Their love, their choice, and the truth of their private union. Yet, even in this quiet, I sensed that the family drama was far from over. Secrets have a way of exposing latent tensions, of forcing people to confront emotions long buried. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, perhaps even confrontations that could redefine relationships. But for tonight, the couple's bond remained unshaken. And that, I realized, was the most important anchor amidst the rising tide of whispers and judgments. The simple whisper of last night, "I took his last name last night," had evolved into a force that would challenge, test, and ultimately redefine the fabric of our family. And as I watched them together hand in hand, I knew that the journey ahead would be turbulent, but it would also reveal the resilience, love, and courage that had quietly taken root in their hearts. The next morning, the tension in the house was palpable. Even the usual chatter of breakfast seemed subdued, replaced by glances that lingered a second too long, and unspoken words hanging in the air like thick fog. The whispers of yesterday had turned into murmurs that traveled silently through the family, and today felt like the calm before a storm. A storm I feared was about to hit full force. As I carried plates to the table, I noticed my brother's expression, a mixture of disbelief and simmering frustration. He had barely slept, pacing late into the night, replaying the news of the secret wedding over and over in his mind. I knew it wasn't malice that troubled him. It was a deep sense of betrayal and exclusion. Finally he spoke, his voice tight with emotion. "I just don't understand why this couldn't have been shared. Why all the secrecy?" His tone was sharper than usual, cutting through the quiet of the kitchen. My daughter-in-law looked up from her cup of coffee, her calm eyes meeting his with quiet determination. "It wasn't meant to hurt anyone," she said softly but firmly. "It was about us, our choice, our commitment. We wanted it to be real before anyone else could define it or interfere." I intervened, placing a hand on my brother's arm. "You have to understand this wasn't disrespect. It was intimacy. They wanted a moment that belonged solely to them first." He shook his head, unable to accept the explanation so easily. Intimacy is one thing, but a wedding? A life-changing event? Family matters. This wasn't just about you two. My son, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "We understand your frustration, truly. But love isn't always about the grand announcement or approval. It's about commitment and honesty between us. That's why we did it this way." The air grew heavier. I could feel the tension crackling, each word layered with emotion, pride, and hurt. My niece, ever the blunt one, chimed in with a pointed tone. "So basically, you guys didn't care about anyone else's feelings. You just did what you wanted?" "Yes," my daughter-in-law replied calmly, "because our love, our union, deserved authenticity, not compliance, not permission. It wasn't meant to alienate anyone, but some moments are ours alone." A hush fell over the table. Her words, though simple, carried weight. The reality of her statement slowly sank in, forcing everyone to confront the balance between familial expectation and personal autonomy. Some nodded reluctantly, realizing the truth in her reasoning. Others, however, struggled, their resentment simmering beneath the surface. Then, my brother's wife spoke, her voice cutting through the quiet. "You can say it wasn't about disrespect, but the truth is it feels exclusionary. You left everyone in the dark. Family members are feeling hurt, even if they don't say it." I felt the sting of truth in her words. Yes, feelings were hurt, but intent mattered too. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, their hands subtly touching under the table, a quiet defiance that symbolized unity and strength. "Mom was told," my son reminded calmly. "I think that matters more than you realize. Inclusion doesn't always require everyone knowing everything first. Sometimes it's about understanding why a choice was made." I could see the debate reaching a tipping point. Emotions fraying at the edges, words teetering on confrontation, yet tempered by the undeniable truth of their commitment. It was a delicate balance, and one false word could ignite an argument that might leave scars longer than the memory of the secret wedding itself. I took a deep breath. "Look, the wedding happened. It was private. They didn't mean to hurt anyone. Now, we can either dwell on anger, or we can accept their choice and celebrate their love." My daughter-in-law smiled faintly, relief washing over her features. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes locking with mine. "It's not easy, I know, but this is our path." My brother finally exhaled, tension giving way slightly. "I suppose I just needed to understand. It's not my way, but it's yours. I'll try to respect that." For a moment, the storm paused. The confrontation hadn't fully resolved the tension, but it had surfaced the emotions, the anger, confusion, curiosity, and love that had been simmering beneath polite smiles and careful silences. Now, the family could begin to navigate these feelings, slowly, cautiously, but with awareness. Evening arrived, and the ripple of the secret wedding had reached beyond immediate conversations. Friends and distant relatives had begun asking questions, some congratulatory, some incredulous. My son and daughter-in-law handled the calls with grace, explaining the choice and emphasizing the love and authenticity that had guided their decision. As the night drew to a close, I reflected on the day's events. The confrontation had been difficult, yes, but necessary. It had allowed the unspoken tension to surface, forcing everyone to acknowledge the reality of the wedding and its implications for the family. And while the ripple effects would continue, there was now a foundation: honesty, love, and understanding, on which the family could rebuild trust and navigate future challenges. The whisper of last night, "I took his last name last night," had grown into a wave that would test boundaries, reveal hidden emotions, and ultimately reshape the dynamics of our household. But it was also a wave that carried lessons of autonomy, respect, and the courage to embrace love on one's own terms. And as I watched them together, side by side, I understood that their journey was only beginning. The secret wedding had not ended the story. It had only opened a door to new challenges, deeper bonds, and the unpredictable, sometimes turbulent, but always transformative nature of family life. The following morning began with an unsettling quiet. Even the usual household noises seemed muted, replaced by an almost tangible tension that clung to every corner. I had barely stepped into the kitchen when a small envelope, distinctly unfamiliar, caught my eye on the counter. The handwriting was elegant, precise, but there was no name. Only a postmark that suggested it had come from someone outside our immediate circle. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. My heart beat a little faster. Something about the envelope screamed significance, an unknown variable about to disrupt the fragile balance of emotions that the secret wedding had already ignited. Curiosity and a creeping sense of apprehension got the better of me. I carefully opened it, revealing a single sheet of paper folded neatly inside. The handwriting was familiar, yet the words were shocking. "I know about last night. The secret wedding, and there's more you don't know. Meet me tomorrow, alone, urgent." A chill ran down my spine. The words were brief, almost cryptic, but their implications were explosive. Someone outside our family was aware of the wedding, and they wanted to discuss details we hadn't shared. I felt my pulse quicken. Who could have known? And what else might they know? Before I could dwell further, my daughter-in-law entered the kitchen, humming softly, unaware of the envelope in my hands. I quickly tucked it away, unsure how to bring it up without alarming her. For a moment, I considered telling my son, but the message specifically requested secrecy, and something about the urgency of the tone compelled me to handle it carefully. Breakfast was awkward. The usual warmth of morning banter replaced by my distracted glances toward the envelope. My son noticed, of course, and raised an eyebrow. "Mom, everything okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just a little preoccupied, that's all." But inside, my mind raced. The ripple effect of the secret wedding had extended further than I could have imagined. This letter hinted at a revelation or confrontation that could shake the family once again, this time from an external source. As the day unfolded, I found myself replaying the words over and over, and there's more you don't know. What more could there be? The ceremony had been private, intimate, carefully planned. Could there be some hidden detail my daughter-in-law or son had neglected to mention? Or was this someone attempting to interfere, perhaps with ill intent? I paced the living room, turning over every scenario in my mind. The implications were endless, from harmless curiosity to potential scandal. My pulse quickened with every imagined possibility, and yet amidst the fear and anticipation, there was also a strange thrill. A reminder that life, like love, often arrives with unexpected twists that test patience, resilience, and judgment. By evening, I knew I could no longer ignore the letter. The urgency demanded attention. I decided I would meet the mysterious sender the next day, alone as requested, to uncover the truth behind the cryptic words. Night fell, and the house settled into an uneasy calm. My son and daughter-in-law were unaware of the letter's contents, oblivious to the tension quietly growing beneath the surface. I placed the envelope carefully on my nightstand, resolving to face whatever awaited me with caution, determination, and a steady heart. Sleep came fitfully. The words of the letter haunted my thoughts, interwoven with memories of the secret wedding and the ripple effects that had unfolded over the past days. The whisper of last night, I took his last name last night, had already initiated a cascade of revelations, challenges, and emotional confrontations. Now, it seemed, the story was far from over. And deep down, I sensed that tomorrow's meeting would uncover truths that could alter the family's trajectory in ways we had never anticipated. A new wave of tension, curiosity, and perhaps even danger awaited. One that demanded courage, foresight, and the resilience to face secrets that refused to remain hidden. As I drifted into restless sleep, the letter rested beside me, a tangible symbol of the unknown challenges ahead. The secret wedding had set the stage, but this unexpected message was the next act, one that promised revelations, confrontations, and emotional turbulence that would test every bond, trust, and expectation within the family. The whisper from last night had grown into a storm, and I knew the calm before the storm was over. Tomorrow, everything could change. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. Even the birds outside seemed quieter, as if nature itself sensed the tension brewing within me. The envelope rested in my hand, its weight now more than just paper. It was a summons, a warning, and a promise of revelations I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I dressed carefully, opting for something modest yet professional, aware that first impressions might matter if the sender of the letter was someone with intentions unknown. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this a family friend with hidden knowledge? Someone who disapproved of the secret wedding? Or worse, someone with intentions that could disrupt everything we had worked to protect? The meeting point was an old cafe near the edge of town, a place neutral enough for discretion. I arrived early, nerves tightening with every passing second. The bell above the door jingled intermittently as patrons came and went, oblivious to the storm I carried with me in the envelope. Finally, the mysterious figure appeared. She was older, elegantly dressed, with a composed demeanor that suggested authority and knowledge. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, immediately locked onto mine. "You received my letter," she said, her voice calm, but edged with urgency. "Yes," I replied cautiously, taking a seat opposite her. "Why? What is this about?" She leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. "The wedding? The secrecy. It's bigger than you think. There are people who have been watching, waiting for an opportunity. What seemed like a simple private ceremony has triggered attention from individuals who do not understand boundaries or love, and they intend to interfere." My heart skipped. "Interfere? Who? Why?" Her gaze did not waver. "There are distant relatives, business associates, even former friends who feel slighted. They see the secrecy as a slight, an affront, and some, they are willing to exploit it for personal gain." I felt a chill run down my spine. Exploit? How? For what? They want control, influence, even revenge. Your son and his wife have made a bold move, a declaration of independence. And as a result, they've painted a target on themselves. But it's not just about them. It's about you, the family, and everyone connected to this secret. I swallowed hard, trying to process her words. The private wedding, meant to be an intimate celebration of love, had inadvertently drawn the attention of people who would manipulate, interfere, or worse. I realized that what had begun as a whisper, "I took his last name last night," had now escalated into a storm of consequences that none of us could have foreseen. "Why tell me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because you are the bridge," she said solemnly. "You understand the family, the dynamics, and you have the trust of your son and daughter-in-law. You need to prepare, to anticipate, and to protect. The choices you make in the next few days will determine whether this storm becomes a tempest or passes quietly." Her words weighed heavily on me. I realized that my role had shifted yet again, from observer to protector, from family member to strategist. The ripple effects of the secret wedding were no longer confined to emotions. They had spilled into a realm of external scrutiny, potential confrontation, and perhaps danger. Before I could respond, she handed me a small folder. Inside were documents, photographs, and notes, evidence of people who had been tracking the couple's movements, subtly probing for weaknesses, and scheming ways to exploit the secrecy. My pulse raced as I flipped through the contents, each page confirming the urgency she had described. "You need to act carefully," she continued. "No rash decisions, no confrontations without strategy. Your son and daughter-in-law trust you, and right now, you are the key to navigating this safely." I nodded, though uncertainty churned inside me. Protecting them while managing the family, the gossip, and the external threats seemed almost impossible. Yet I knew one thing. I could not let the secret wedding, their love, and their hard-earned happiness be undermined. As I left the cafe, the autumn air hitting my face, I realized the journey ahead was far from over. The secret wedding had not ended. It had only revealed new challenges, hidden agendas, and the reality that love, however pure, often attracts scrutiny, envy, and even malice. Driving home, I thought about my son and daughter-in-law, their hands intertwined, their smiles genuine, their bond unbreakable. They had chosen authenticity, privacy, and independence. Now it was my turn to choose, to protect, to anticipate, and to act. The whisper from last night, "I took his last name last night," had become a warning, a responsibility, and a call to action. And as I pulled into the driveway, I knew that the next steps would define not only the safety of the couple, but the integrity, trust, and future of our entire family. The house felt unusually still that evening. Even the familiar hum of appliances and distant traffic seemed muted, as though the world itself held its breath. I clutched the folder from the cafe tightly, the papers inside a stark reminder that the secret wedding had attracted attention I hadn't anticipated. I found my son and daughter-in-law in the living room, reviewing wedding photos once more. Their laughter, soft and genuine, was like a fragile bubble in the storm that had been quietly building around them. I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to introduce the gravity of the situation without shattering their fragile peace. Finally, I spoke. "There's something I need to tell you. Something important." They looked up instantly, their smiles fading slightly, sensing the weight in my voice. I placed the folder on the coffee table, letting the papers spill open like evidence of a looming threat. "What is this?" my daughter-in-law asked, curiosity mixed with unease. "These are people who have been watching, waiting for a chance to interfere," I said, my voice steady but low. "They know about the wedding. They know the secrecy, and some of them, they intend to use it against you." Shock flickered across their faces. My son's jaw tightened, but his eyes were determined. "Who are they?" he asked. I pointed to the documents. "Distant relatives, old acquaintances, even business associates. They've been gathering information, probing for vulnerabilities, and now they see your private celebration as a way to gain leverage." My daughter-in-law's hands trembled slightly. "Leverage? For what?" "For control, influence, revenge. Some simply don't approve of the choices you made and want to manipulate the situation to their advantage," I explained. "It's a ripple effect you never anticipated, and now we need to act." The gravity of the situation sank in. The private wedding, meant to be a simple, intimate act of love, had unintentionally triggered a network of scrutiny and scheming. The ripple was no longer emotional. It was real, dangerous, and immediate. "We have to be careful," I continued. "Every conversation, every social interaction, it could be a trap. Some of these people will try subtle manipulation. Others might be more aggressive." My son's eyes met mine, filled with determination. "Then we face it together. We've already taken control of our lives once. We can do it again." But my daughter-in-law shook her head. "It's not just about us. If these people interfere, they'll target the family too. Friends, relatives, anyone who's close." "We need a plan," I nodded. "Exactly, and that's why I came here today. We need to anticipate every move, to protect not just your happiness, but the integrity of everyone involved. You chose authenticity. Now we need strategy." The room fell silent as the reality set in. The ripple effect of their secret wedding had expanded far beyond anything we had imagined. What had begun as an intimate, whispered promise, "I took his last name last night," had evolved into a challenge that tested loyalty, trust, and resilience. Suddenly, the phone rang, sharp and insistent. I picked it up, heart pounding. The voice on the other end was calm, smooth, yet carried a hidden threat. "I hear congratulations are in order," the voice said, the tone polite but laced with menace. A wedding without witnesses is always intriguing, but secrets have a way of being revealed. "Be careful who you trust." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice steady but strained. There was a pause. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. The threat was real, the intentions unknown, and the stakes higher than ever. The secret wedding had not only challenged expectations, but had attracted people who thrived on disruption and control. My son placed a hand over mine, grounding me. "We'll face this," he said firmly. "We've handled surprises before. We'll handle this too." But deep down, I knew it would be more than a challenge. It would be a test of loyalty, courage, and the very foundation of trust within our family. The whispers of last night had grown into a storm, and now the storm had a face, calculated, patient, and dangerous. As night fell, I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, their hands intertwined, their expressions resolute. Their love had already defied convention, secrecy, and expectations. Now it would be tested by external forces determined to disrupt the fragile balance they had worked so hard to create. The hidden threat loomed, silent yet omnipresent, promising challenges that would demand strategy, bravery, and unity. And as I placed the phone down, the echo of their whispered words from the wedding night, "I took his last name last night," resonated in my mind. What had begun as an intimate promise of love had now become a call to vigilance, and the family's journey was entering its most perilous chapter yet, tomorrow. The ripple would turn into waves, and the real battle for trust, love, and family loyalty would begin. The morning air was crisp, but it carried a tension heavier than the autumn fog that clung to the streets. I could feel it as soon as I stepped out of the house. A pressure, a subtle unease that clung to every step. The mysterious phone call from last night lingered in my mind, its threat a shadow I couldn't shake. Someone out there knew, and they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Inside the house, my son and daughter-in-law were quietly preparing for the day, unaware of the full weight of the threat. Their laughter and light chatter were a fragile shield against the storm I knew was coming. I watched them, silently marveling at their composure and courage. But I also knew that courage alone wouldn't be enough. Strategy, foresight, and careful action would be required. At breakfast, the tension was palpable. My brother and his family were present, and the air between us had changed. The recent confrontations, the whispers, and now the external threat had shifted dynamics. Eyes flicked nervously toward me as if searching for answers I was still processing myself. The first knock came just as we were finishing. My son and daughter-in-law exchanged curious glances. I rose cautiously, moving toward the door. Outside stood a figure I recognized immediately. The woman from the cafe, her posture composed, eyes sharp. "I warned you," she said calmly, stepping inside. "The storm isn't waiting. It's here." I gestured for her to sit. "Explain," I demanded. "Tell me everything." She pulled out documents, photographs, and notes. Evidence of people who had been monitoring us, probing for weaknesses, and scheming ways to exploit the secrecy of the wedding. Names, connections, and even hidden grievances were meticulously documented. "They've been planning this for months," she said. "They saw your son and daughter-in-law's secrecy as a threat to their influence, and now they intend to act." My son's expression hardened. "Act how?" "Disrupt the family, create doubt, manipulate trust. They're skilled, patient, and dangerous, and some are closer than you realize." A chill ran through me. The ripple of the secret wedding had transformed into a full-blown threat. Every glance, every conversation, even the trust we took for granted could be weaponized. Then, unexpectedly, my niece burst into the room, holding her phone. "Mom just sent me a message," she said breathlessly. "She knows. She's coming. And she's furious." My brother's wife's arrival was imminent. I could feel the tension spike, the fragile calm fracturing. The confrontation we had anticipated was no longer hypothetical. It was unfolding before our eyes. When she arrived, the door slammed open, and her expression was stormy, eyes blazing. "I can't believe this," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the house. "A secret wedding? Without any of us knowing? Do you have any idea how disrespectful this is?" My daughter-in-law remained composed, her hands folded calmly in front of her. "We didn't mean to disrespect anyone," she said softly, her voice steady. "This was about us, our choice, our moment, nothing more." Her words, calm and measured, only seemed to fuel my sister-in-law's anger. "A moment? You've caused chaos. People are talking. Family is divided. You think love excuses secrecy?" I stepped forward, attempting to mediate. "It's not about disrespect. It's about intimacy. They wanted something personal before sharing it with everyone else. That doesn't diminish their love or their respect for the family." But the tension was electric, words clashing like thunder. My brother, caught in the middle, struggled to remain neutral. "Enough," he said finally, his voice tight. "We can argue all day, but this has gone too far. We need to think." Calmly. The woman from the cafe interjected, her tone cutting through the argument. "Calm is good, but action is better. The people monitoring you won't wait for calm. Every decision you delay, every hesitation you allow, gives them leverage." The room fell silent. Even my niece's chatter ceased, replaced by an uneasy awareness. The reality was clear. The secret wedding, meant to be private and intimate, had inadvertently unleashed forces beyond our control. The ripple of whispers and curiosity had become a wave of scrutiny, manipulation, and threat. My son finally spoke, his voice firm and unwavering. "We've faced surprises before. We've handled challenges, family drama, and even disapproval. We will face this too, together, but we will not be controlled by fear, gossip, or resentment." The gravity of the situation sank in. The private wedding, meant to be a simple, intimate act of love, had unintentionally triggered a network of scrutiny and scheming. The ripple was no longer emotional. It was real, dangerous, and immediate. "We have to be careful," I continued. "Every conversation, every social interaction, it could be a trap. Some of these people will try subtle manipulation. Others might be more aggressive." My son's eyes met mine, filled with determination. "Then we face it together. We've already taken control of our lives once. We can do it again." But my daughter-in-law shook her head. "It's not just about us. If these people interfere, they'll target the family too. Friends, relatives, anyone who's close." "We need a plan," I nodded. "Exactly. And that's why I came here today. We need to anticipate every move, to protect not just your happiness, but the integrity of everyone involved. You chose authenticity. Now we need strategy." The room fell silent as the reality set in. The ripple effect of their secret wedding had expanded far beyond anything we had imagined. What had begun as an intimate, whispered promise, "I took his last name last night," had evolved into a challenge that tested loyalty, trust, and resilience. Suddenly the phone rang, sharp and insistent. I picked it up, heart pounding. The voice on the other end was calm, smooth, yet carried a hidden threat. "I hear congratulations are in order," the voice said, the tone polite but laced with menace. "A wedding without witnesses is always intriguing, but secrets have a way of being revealed. Be careful who you trust." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice steady but strained. There was a pause. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. The threat was real, the intentions unknown, and the stakes higher than ever. The secret wedding had not only challenged expectations, but had attracted people who thrived on disruption and control. My son placed a hand over mine, grounding me. "We'll face this," he said firmly. "We've handled surprises before. We'll handle this too." But deep down, I knew it would be more than a challenge. It would be a test of loyalty, courage, and the very foundation of trust within our family. The whispers of last night had grown into a storm, and now the storm had a face, calculated, patient, and dangerous. As night fell, I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, their hands intertwined, their expressions resolute. Their love had already defied convention, secrecy, and expectations. Now it would be tested by external forces determined to disrupt the fragile balance they had worked so hard to create. The hidden threat loomed, silent yet omnipresent, promising challenges that would demand strategy, bravery, and unity. And as I placed the phone down, the echo of their whispered words from the wedding night, "I took his last name last night," resonated in my mind. What had begun as an intimate promise of love had now become a call to vigilance, and the family's journey was entering its most perilous chapter yet, tomorrow. The ripple would turn into waves, and the real battle for trust, love, and family loyalty would begin. The morning air was crisp, but it carried a tension heavier than the autumn fog that clung to the streets. I could feel it as soon as I stepped out of the house. A pressure, a subtle unease that clung to every step. The mysterious phone call from last night lingered in my mind, its threat a shadow I couldn't shake. Someone out there knew, and they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Inside the house, my son and daughter-in-law were quietly preparing for the day, unaware of the full weight of the threat. Their laughter and light chatter were a fragile shield against the storm I knew was coming. I watched them, silently marveling at their composure and courage. But I also knew that courage alone wouldn't be enough. Strategy, foresight, and careful action would be required. At breakfast, the tension was palpable. My brother and his family were present, and the air between us had changed. The recent confrontations, the whispers, and now the external threat had shifted dynamics. Eyes flicked nervously toward me as if searching for answers I was still processing myself. The first knock came just as we were finishing. My son and daughter-in-law exchanged curious glances. I rose cautiously, moving toward the door. Outside stood a figure I recognized immediately. The woman from the cafe, her posture composed, eyes sharp. "I warned you," she said calmly, stepping inside. "The storm isn't waiting. It's here." I gestured for her to sit. "Explain," I demanded. "Tell me everything." She pulled out documents, photographs, and notes. Evidence of people who had been monitoring us, probing for weaknesses, and scheming ways to exploit the secrecy of the wedding. Names, connections, and even hidden grievances were meticulously documented. "They've been planning this for months," she said. "They saw your son and daughter-in-law's secrecy as a threat to their influence, and now they intend to act." My son's expression hardened. "Act how?" "Disrupt the family, create doubt, manipulate trust. They're skilled, patient, and dangerous, and some are closer than you realize." A chill ran through me. The ripple of the secret wedding had transformed into a full-blown threat. Every glance, every conversation, even the trust we took for granted could be weaponized. Then, unexpectedly, my niece burst into the room, holding her phone. "Mom just sent me a message," she said breathlessly. "She knows. She's coming, and she's furious." My brother's wife's arrival was imminent. I could feel the tension spike, the fragile calm fracturing. The confrontation we had anticipated was no longer hypothetical. It was unfolding before our eyes. When she arrived, the door slammed open, and her expression was stormy, eyes blazing. "I can't believe this," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the house. "A secret wedding? Without any of us knowing? Do you have any idea how disrespectful this is?" My daughter-in-law remained composed, her hands folded calmly in front of her. "We didn't mean to disrespect anyone," she said softly, her voice steady. "This was about us, our choice, our moment, nothing more." Her words, calm and measured, only seemed to fuel my sister-in-law's anger. "A moment? You've caused chaos. People are talking. Family is divided. You think love excuses secrecy?" I stepped forward, attempting to mediate. "It's not about disrespect. It's about intimacy. They wanted something personal before sharing it with everyone else. That doesn't diminish their love or their respect for the family." But the tension was electric, words clashing like thunder. My brother, caught in the middle, struggled to remain neutral. "Enough," he said finally, his voice tight. "We can argue all day, but this has gone too far. We need to think." Calmly. The woman from the cafe interjected, her tone cutting through the argument. "Calm is good, but action is better. The people monitoring you won't wait for calm. Every decision you delay, every hesitation you allow, gives them leverage." The room fell silent. Even my niece's chatter ceased, replaced by an uneasy awareness. The reality was clear. The secret wedding, meant to be private and intimate, had inadvertently unleashed forces beyond our control. The ripple of whispers and curiosity had become a wave of scrutiny, manipulation, and threat. My son finally spoke, his voice firm and unwavering. We've faced surprises before. We've handled challenges, family drama, and even disapproval. We will face this too, together. But we will not be controlled by fear, gossip, or resentment.